Hi, I'm Erik Voss, and Halloween's newest installment will terrify you with Hollywood's deadliest immortal killing machine, Jamie Lee Curtis. Many are comparing this 2018 Halloween to The Force Awakens for the way the two movies pay homage to the original 70s classics, and for how cool you can look by going gray. So let us rewatch this movie, scene by scene, for all these Easter eggs and connections that you might have missed, but also for the clever ways this movie reverses key elements of the original film to produce a thrilling new chapter. Spoiler warning for this movie, go watch Halloween first and then come back here. Let's get started. This movie opens in Michael Myers' mental hospital with an interesting close-up of a clock. Notice how the hands of the clock point to 10 and 3, though the framing suggests that that could be a 30 or a 31. Numbers that definitely would not be on the face of a clock, I know. But I think the filmmakers included this detail as a nod to the movie's title, 1031 Halloween. True crime podcasters Aaron Corey and Dana Haynes meet with Michael's psychiatrist, Dr. Sartain. And their chat references Dr. Loomis, the psychiatrist from the original films played by Donald Pleasance. Later in this movie, Laurie Strode actually says to Sartain, "You're the new Loomis." Now, during this scene, there's also a very subtle close-up of Sartain's pen, which we later find out contains a concealed blade. Now, it's hard to tell, but it looked like it had the shape of a curved human spine attached to the back of a skull piece. Perhaps a reference to a psychiatrist's interest in the anatomy of the spinal cord and the brain. But it just goes to show that Sartain has been using this secret blade for a while now, and has probably been waiting for his chance to help Michael Myers escape. These podcasters triggering Michael with his old mask, reminding him of his mortal enemy, Laurie Strode, might be the first step of that master plan by Sartain. Michael Myers in this movie is played by two actors, James Jude Courtney, and they also brought back the original Michael actor, Nick Castle, to play him for a few key moments. And from here we jump into the opening credits, which is a direct parallel to the original film's opening credits. The director of this movie, David Gordon Green, working with his Eastbound and Down / Vice Principals team of Danny McBride and Jeff Fradley, worked closely with the original director John Carpenter to recapture the classic aesthetic. Carpenter actually covered his iconic score for the movie, composing a slightly updated version with his son Cody and with the composer Daniel Davies. And you can hear this new music here and see how the titles have the same orange typeface as before, as well as, of course, the image of the jack-o'-lantern. However, this jack-o'-lantern now begins molded and decayed, with Green reversing the shot to show it gradually reforming. This reflects Michael Myers' resurrection, his reawakening, but also the way this whole movie reverses the roles of Michael Myers and Laurie. Aaron describes this concept in the next scene as the podcasters make their way to the fortified home of Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis. He theorizes that one monster may have created another, and we'll see how this movie has reversed Laurie's role from scream queen, damsel in distress, to a deadly predator stalking its prey, just like Michael Myers is. This movie is set exactly 40 years after the original story, and we see how Laurie has spent these past 4 decades recovering from her trauma by taking paranoid precautions, gradually preparing to trap and kill Michael Myers. And yeah, this version of the character is definitely inspired by the deconstruction of that final girl trope that we saw in the Terminator and Alien series. Characters like Sarah Connor and Ripley definitely took over their sequels as over-prepared badasses that no one really took seriously until the end when they were proven right. And you could argue that some other Halloween movies may have already attempted this transition into heroism with Laurie Strode, but I would say none of them have been quite as effective as this latest chapter. And next we meet Laurie's estranged family. Her daughter Karen, played by Judy Greer, and Karen's husband Jay, played by Toby Huss, and their daughter Allison, played by Andy Matichak. And we first see Karen and Jay setting mouse traps. Now this is actually an interesting setup for the film's final sequence. The booby-trapped home that Laurie raised Karen in is essentially a mousetrap for Michael Myers. And notice how when one of these mousetraps prematurely springs on Jay, that could be foreshadowing his inability to survive in this kind of battle. Allison's boyfriend is named Cameron Elam, and Jay mentions growing up with Cameron's father, Lonnie Elam. Now this is a reference to the original Halloween. Lonnie was one of those kids in Haddonfield who bullies Tommy Doyle in the first movie. Next, Allison and her friends Vicky and Dave walk through the neighborhoods of Haddonfield discussing their Halloween plans, and yeah, this is another tonal parallel to the original, in which Carpenter used similar voyeuristic camera movement to follow Laurie and her friends on their way to school throughout these same streets. These kids reference those specific events, bringing up the theory that Michael Myers was Laurie's brother. Allison dismisses that as a rumor that some people made up to make themselves feel better. This is all a meta reference to the twist of Halloween 2, in which Michael and Laurie were revealed as siblings.
That Strode girl, that That's Michael Myers' sister.
But this movie erases the events of everything after the first film, replacing the whole timeline as one direct sequel. And Danny McBride confirmed that Michael and Laurie are no longer related. In Allison's high school, the original Halloween parallels continue. She sits in the same exact desk of her classroom as her grandmother did, back left corner, tuning out as her teacher lectures on the same subject, fate. In the first movie, the teacher cites the philosopher Samuels, who doesn't exist by the way, and Laurie answers a question saying that Samuels considers fate a natural, secular element of our lives, like earth, water, and fire. But in this movie, the teacher updates the lecture, talking about Frankel's interpretation, saying that Frankel said fate took a different course. Now, it sounds like she's referring to the philosopher Viktor Frankl. He's a philosopher and Holocaust survivor who wrote in his book Man's Search for Meaning that fates are under our own control, that we can decide whether we are worthy of our sufferings. And you can see how that concept applies to Laurie's arc in this movie. The fact that this moment is updating the fate lecture reflects the deeper theme of the story, that Laurie isn't locked into a fate outside of her control anymore, that she can actually control her own destiny and give her past suffering meaning. And by the way, the voice of the teacher here might sound familiar. It's actually a cameo by actor PJ Soles, who played Laurie's friend Linda in the original movie. And of course, this shot of Allison looking out the window and realizing someone is watching her, it's another example of the reversal of roles idea that I brought up before. In the original movie, Laurie looked out the window to see Michael staring back at her. But here, Allison sees her grandmother, Laurie. Laurie has essentially replaced Michael as the hunter of this movie. She must become that which is feared to defeat what makes her fearful. Moving on, there's a quick scene of Laurie watching Michael as his bus transfers mental patients to the new facility, and she's drinking shots in her truck and she screams. There's actually a theory that Laurie could have rammed this bus off the road, intentionally causing Michael's escape in order to lure him in and finally kill him. There's a rumor that this could have been in an earlier version of the movie, thus explaining some of her lines throughout the film and why we never really see footage of the accident itself. But just to be clear, this final cut that we saw included more than enough clues that Sartain was definitely responsible. Afterward, Laurie joins the family dinner at the restaurant, and if you listen closely to Laurie's mumbling, she refers to Michael as the Shape. This is a nod to the original film, which listed Nick Castle only as the Shape in the credits. It's a term that was otherwise never spoken out loud in the movie. Next, there's this hunter and his son in their truck on the road, and one of the best Easter eggs in the movie comes up here. The radio is playing a song called Close to Me. This song was actually improvised by Jamie Lee Curtis and John Carpenter for the original film. They were on a very, very small budget and couldn't afford the rights to a real song, so Carpenter had Curtis sing and hum this fake country song to herself.
Wish I had you all alone. Just that.
And the imagery here once again borrows from the original film. Escaped mental patients dressed in white appearing suddenly in the headlights, and Michael Myers popping up in the backseat of the car, strangling the victim in the driver's seat. As Deputy Hawkins gets on the case, we return to another familiar location, the Haddonfield Cemetery. Loomis visited the same grave of Michael's sister, Judith Myers, and now the gravestone that Michael stole has been returned to its rightful place. Michael catches up to the podcasters at the gas station, killing them both. Now, there have been past scenes at gas stations and rest stops throughout the Halloween series and Halloween 4 and H2O, but guys, after 11 movies, some locations are just gonna be reused without having to be a direct reference to it. Though, I do think the close-up of Dana's feet going limp as Michael chokes her to death could be a reference to the same shot of how Bob died in the first movie. And when Michael finally reunites with his mask, you can hear the sound of his breathing. Original actor Nick Castle actually recorded this audio since it's so distinctive to the character's presence. When Hawkins and the sheriff examine the crime scene and open up Michael's file, they refer to the crimes as the babysitter murders. Now, the babysitter murders was actually John Carpenter's original title for the film Halloween. And this brings us to Michael's arrival in Haddonfield on Halloween night. First, he runs into a kid with a cowboy hat and a boombox. That's actually a nod to a kid that we saw in Halloween 2. And this is immediately followed by another Halloween 2 reference, with Michael killing a woman in curlers and a pink bathrobe and stealing her kitchen knife. He did the same exact thing to Mrs. Elrod in Halloween 2. Meanwhile, notice some of the nearby trick-or-treaters who are wearing witch and skull and jack-o'-lantern masks. This is a nod to Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, probably the most divisive movie of the series. It features a novelty company putting deadly computer chips in witch skull and jack-o'-lantern masks that could be triggered by TV jingles. Yeah, I went to some weird places. Meanwhile, Allison Friend's Vicky is babysitting the most hilarious kid in the world, Julian, and using this house to hook up with her boyfriend Dave. This whole sequence is pretty much a restaging of Linda and Bob from the first film. Michael kills Dave in pretty much the same way that he killed Bob. He stabs him to a wall, and he poses Vicky similarly with a jack-o'-lantern beside inside her body, but here he poses her by putting a ghost sheet over her, exactly like the one that he wore in the first movie. And you also see how there's a ton of shots of the laundry hanging up to dry outside, which the director included to evoke the famous Michael jump scare in the laundry line in the original. Hawkins and Laurie arrive on the scene, and Laurie scares a bunch of kids. You'll notice that one of those kids wears a silver shamrock costume. That's a nod to the costume that Michael wore as a kid on the night of his first kill. Michael gets away, and Laurie and her family and the cops and Sartain, they all regroup, except for Allison. So Laurie leaves a voicemail on Allison's phone, barking at her, "Do as I say!" Apparently Laurie says "do as I say" a few times throughout the Halloween series. She says them to the two kids in the first movie, and she says "do as I say" to her son and his girlfriend in H2O. But again, 11 movies, only so many word combinations. Michael then stalks Allison and that loser who tried to be her rebound. He killed Oscar and then freaked out Allison. Then notice these shots of Allison wailing in the street. She pounds on strangers' doors desperately. This all reminds me of that bystander effect moment of the first movie. Remember when Laurie was begging a neighbor to help, to no avail? Allison's a bit luckier, but only for a moment, because she ends up in the hands of Sartain, who kills Hawkins with his super penknife. And then Sartain reveals that he was the reason the bus crashed and Michael was able to escape. He wants to see Michael out in the wild and reunite him with Laurie because they defined each other, and he wants to see true evil in action. Yeah, it doesn't totally make sense. But anyway, they all end up back at Laurie's house where Michael kills Sartain and the two cops who are guarding it, turns their heads into flesho lanterns, and he kills Jay. And we finally arrive at the showdown. So Laurie's house is full of interesting set details. First little detail, she kept her sun hat. Remember, that was the one that hung on her wall in her bedroom in the first movie. But also, you can see this dollhouse. This is the one that Karen played with as a girl, and it's an exact replica of the Myers house, the house where he killed his sister Judith in 1963. So Laurie keeps this in her home as a way to carry the weight of Michael's sins. Her leaving his evil to survive is kind of her unfinished business. As Laurie sweeps to the house looking for Michael, the camera lingers on closet shutter doors. Once again, we're seeing the role reversal. Back in the Doyle house, Laurie hid from Michael in a closet just like this, but now she is the hunter searching for the prey. Michael tries to turn the tables on Laurie upstairs, filling the room with her target mannequins and trying to scare her with Jay's body, which flops out, just like Bob and Nancy's corpses did in the first movie. But if you look closely, Laurie has designed this room to have almost the exact same layout, with the closet and the French doors that open out to a balcony as the room back in the Doyle house. She has been reliving that moment over and over in her mind for 40 years. And now she's kind of J-Lo enoughin' Michael Myers. She's luring him directly into her mousetrap where she'll have the upper hand. And it all comes full circle when Michael launches her over the balcony. He looks down to see her motionless body on the ground, but when he looks back, she's gone. This is a great callback. She's pulling the same move that he pulled on Loomis back in the first movie. And this all leads to 3 generations of the Strode women trapping Michael in the basement and torching the house. Karen actually pretends to panic in order to lure Michael down there. She knows it's the perfect bait for him. And then she fires a rifle. If you look closely, you can see it's marked with KS for Karen Strode, suggesting that she actually grew up with her mother's firearm training. So killing Michael Myers by burning him alive is kind of a play from the finale of Halloween 2 when Loomis kills him the same way, but that movie shows us Michael's burning body, whereas this movie explicitly does not. In fact, if you listen closely to the end credits, you can hear Michael Myers still breathing through his mask. The producers of this movie always intended to shoot 2 of these new Halloween movies back to back, but they wanted to wait to see how well the first one did before they committed to a second. But now this movie was a big hit, I think it's safe to assume that Michael Myers will return. But I will say it's pretty insane how hard it is to kill this dude. Like, even if you are evil incarnate, you don't just take a gunshot to the face and sit back up. I would love to explore this mystery more in depth in a separate video, so let me know if you want to see it. And for a deeper explanation of Halloween's ending and how this final sequence might actually have all been orchestrated by Laurie from the beginning, go watch my other video. I go into a lot of interesting questions there. But my question right now for you guys is, what do you think is more important to Laurie? Protecting her family from Michael Myers out of maternal instinct, or just killing him to satisfy her own selfish, vengeful desires? I want to hear your thoughts on this, so comment down below. And follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Erik Voss for a bunch of interesting projects that I'm working on. And subscribe to New Rockstars for more deep dives into everything movies and TV, horror films like Halloween, but also Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, Marvel, Star Wars, really anything you care about that I don't entirely hate, which is everything. I am not capable of hate. Loomis looked into my eyes and saw pure love. Run all you want, but I will find you and compliment you. Hello, Paul Rudd. You aged so well. How do you look so young for decades and decades?